Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever looked at a company and wondered why some of them just seem to win no matter what, while others, even with brilliant leaders, just can't catch a break? Well, the secret, it's often not about the company itself, but the industry it's in. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on industry analysis so you can spot the difference. Let's kick things off with a classic piece of wisdom from one of the best in the business. And who better to learn from than Warren Buffett, right? What he's really saying here is that you can have the best jockey in the world, but if they're riding a bad horse, they're not going to win the race. The industry itself, the business, it has these fundamental economic forces that can either lift a company up or just drag it right down, no matter how smart its leaders are. And that is why understanding the industry is absolutely critical. So that brings us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? If we're trying to understand the business world, how do we actually separate the winners from the losers? How do we spot those promising industries and avoid the ones that are, as Buffett might say, just chronically leaking boats? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down right now. So, our first step is all about perspective. Think about it like this. A great angler doesn't just show up and start fishing anywhere. No, they find a pond that's just teeming with fish. Choosing the right industry is exactly the same. It's about finding that place where the odds are already stacked in your favor, right from the very start. But what are the exact boundaries of that pond? That brings us to our next step. We have to define the battlefield. We've got to know who the real competitors are, because trust me, it is not always as obvious as it sounds. Let's take a cinema chain, for example. If we define its industry really narrowly, say just cinema exhibitors, then we're only looking at other movie theaters. But that misses the gigantic elephant in the room, right? People staying home to watch Netflix is a massive threat. But then, if you go too broad and call it media and entertainment, you're suddenly comparing it to things like live sports, which play by a totally different set of rules. You see, getting this definition wrong is like trying to navigate without a map. Your whole analysis is off before you even begin. And another huge part of defining that battlefield is understanding its terrain. Is it a calm sea or are we in for a storm? That's where cyclicality comes in. You've got your defensive industries like healthcare, where demand is stable no matter what the economy is doing. But then you have the deep cyclicals like steel or mining, and those are on a wild roller coaster. Their fortunes absolutely soar in a boom and then just crash in recession. Knowing this helps you understand the kind of ride you're in for. Okay, so we've defined our industry. Now we get to the really juicy part, the heart of our explainer, mapping out the competition. And for that, we're going to use one of the most famous tools in business strategy, Michael Porter's 5 forces. And to really get why these forces matter, let's bring back Warren Buffett one more time. He talks about looking for businesses that are like economic castles, protected by these deep, unbreachable moats. A moat is just a fancy way of saying a durable competitive advantage. So how do we measure how wide and deep that moat is? Well, that is exactly what the 5 forces are designed to do. Let's start with the first force, industry rivalry. This is all about how intense the fight is among the companies already in the castle. Are they locked in a brutal, constant price war, like you see in the airline industry? Or is the competition, a bit more civilized, allowing everyone to make a decent profit? Intense rivalry. It just kills profits for everyone. Buffett's longtime partner, Charlie Munger, said it best. When the only way you can compete is by being cheaper, it just becomes a race to the bottom. Nobody wins in the long run. And that's why industries with cutthroat rivalry are so incredibly tough. Next up, we have to look at threats from the outside, new entrants. How high are the castle walls? You see, high barriers to entry, things like needing government licenses, holding patents, or just needing a ton of money to get started, they create a really strong moat. They keep new players out, which also means the rivalry inside the castle is less intense because nobody's worried about some new upstart undercutting them. Now, for a much sneakier threat, substitutes. This isn't your direct competitor. This is a totally different product from another industry that makes yours completely obsolete. Think about it. Typewriters weren't killed by better typewriters, they were killed by the personal computer. Film cameras weren't beaten by better film cameras, they were made extinct by digital ones. A powerful substitute can literally wipe an entire industry off the map. Okay, the fourth force flips the script and looks at the customers. How much power do they have? Well, if you're a buyer and there are dozens of sellers offering basically the same thing, you hold all the cards. You can demand lower prices, better service, the whole shebang. When buyers have that much power, it pushes companies into that intense rivalry we talked about, weakening the whole industry's moat. And finally, we look in the other direction, at the suppliers. If a company needs a critical component that only one or two suppliers in the entire world can make, who's really in charge? The suppliers are. They can raise their prices, and the company has no choice but to pay up. So you see, these aren't five separate checkboxes. They're all connected. A weak industry is getting attacked from multiple directions at once, creating a leaky moat that can't protect anyone. Now, the five forces, they give us an amazing snapshot of an industry today. But a really great analysis looks at the movie, not just the photo. It tries to spot the next big waves of change that are coming over the horizon. These massive waves are what we call secular trends. And listen, these aren't just fads. These are deep, powerful, long-term shifts, usually driven by technology or demographics or big policy changes that can completely reshape our world. They create brand new industries while making old ones completely extinct. If you want to see the sheer power of a secular trend, you just have to look at Kodak. I mean, in 1996, this company was an absolute giant. A blue-chip stock, a household name. They were at the absolute peak of their power. They basically owned the entire photography market. And yet, just 16 years later, bankrupt. So what happened? A secular trend happened. The wave of digital photography wasn't just a ripple that rocked Kodak's boat. It was a full-blown tsunami that completely capsized it. It's such a powerful reminder that spotting these trends isn't just about finding opportunities, it's about survival. And these trends often drive industries through a pretty predictable life cycle. Here's a great example. Call taxis in India. They started out in a pioneering stage, then went through this period of incredible growth, and eventually hit maturity. But then, a new trend came along, app-based ride-hailing from companies like Uber and Ola, and it sent the entire industry into a steep, rapid decline. Understanding where an industry is in its life cycle is just crucial. Whew, we have covered a lot of ground. So for our final section, let's take everything we've talked about and pack the key takeaways into your personal analyst's toolkit. Okay, a key tool for any analyst is knowing what to measure. The vital signs of one industry are completely different from another. So for an airline, you'd be tracking something called load factor. Basically, what percentage of seats are filled. For a retailer, you'd obsess over same-store sales growth. And for a telecom company, it's all about average revenue per user, or ARPU. Knowing the right key performance indicators, the KPIs, it's like having a compass to guide your entire analysis. So here's the most important takeaway of all. Industry analysis isn't really about finding all the answers. It's about learning how to ask the right questions. The forces of change are always at work, and value is always migrating from old industries to new ones. The next big shift? It's already happening somewhere. And so we'll leave you with this to think about. Based on everything you've learned today, which industries are you watching?